Having a look at this recent 4K release of the 1987 Arnold Schwarzenegger film The Running Man made me think about all the other Arnie films I have in my collection in one format or another. So whilst The Running Man isn't the most impressive 4K disc I've ever seen, it was a good excuse to get this lot together. I still think Arnie's best film and his best ever performance is the 1984 James Cameron The Terminator, which I'm fortunate enough to have full length on Super 8 film, and it is a very fine Super 8 print. The film on these big reels is possibly his second best film, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Some will argue, however, that Predator is up there, and I do agree with them, and whilst I have Predator on 4K and have reviewed it on this channel, it's the fabulous Super 8 print that I treasure the most. Last Action Hero is another Arnie film I'm particularly fond of, but then there's True Lies too. So many great films to choose from. The Running Man isn't quite in the same league as the first two Terminator films, Predator and the like, but I've always liked it, even if it is a bit daft at times. However, you read that opening script which details the premise of the film, and it states that we're in the year 2017 and the government has colluded with media and is controlling all information. Yes, so perhaps in 1987 this film was somewhat more prophetic than I ever considered, and you add a bit of Blade Runner-esque look to it early on, which isn't as well done as Blade Runner by any stretch, but I do think that Blade Runner look was something that director Paul Michael Glaser went for when he was making this film. Now, where do we know that name Paul Michael Glaser from? Yes, he was Starsky in Starsky and Hutch, a program I followed fervently when I was a child back in the mid to late 1970s. I still love it today. Bit dated, just like The Running Man perhaps, but what a great series. The Running Man is based on a book by a chap called Richard Bachman, who was Stephen King working under a pen name, and the reason I think he did these as a pen name is because these books aren't particularly great, certainly not as good as the best of the Stephen King novels such as Carrie, Salem's Lot and the like, so I think he did these under a pseudonym for that reason. The Running Man of the book here bears little relation to the film other than it's based on a television game show where some people are brought in to run away from what are known as hunters. In the film, of course, they're known as stalkers. Now, also starring in the film are Yaphet Kotto, Maria Conchita Alonso and Richard Dawson, who plays the game show host. And there is a great interaction between Richard Dawson and Arnold Schwarzenegger as Schwarzenegger is about to be put into the game zone, where Schwarzenegger says to him, "I'll be back," to which Dawson replies, "Only in a rerun." Classic. This release contains only a 4K disc, no Blu-rays and absolutely no extras at all, so no Blu-ray to compare the 4K against. The aspect ratio is 1.78 to 1, the sound is DTS HD 5.1 and it has a running time of 1 hour and 41 minutes. It had an estimated budget of $27 million and it grossed at the worldwide box office $38 million. The film was originally Dolby Stereo in cinemas, and as much as I enjoyed this 5.1 sound on the 4K disc, I do think I prefer that original Dolby Stereo, also known as Pro Logic for the home market. Now, there are some sound effects in this that clearly to me were too loud, so someone had got a bit overzealous with the volume control on some of the surround tracks perhaps, but whatever the case, I preferred the original sound. Now, the image quality is a bit grainy on this one at times, and so I found the way around it was to turn HDR down a little. It was fine on my telly on full blast, but on my video projector here with this laser lamp in it, it was punching too much light through and I could see all the grain. So turning the HDR down one notch did the trick. It could be, if you're having the same thing, could be HDR, could be your brightness is too high, but equally, if your sharpness setting on your telly or video projector is anything other than 0, off, 1, the minimum setting, then that will do nothing other than exacerbate film grain. The sharpness isn't brilliant, and that's probably down to the film stock that was used, probably why there's too much grain at times in it. But the colour is good. It's not really over enhanced. I think it's more subtle and suitable for a 1980s film. The contrast is good, and overall it's got a filmic look to it. It's just not that pristine 4K some of you will be expecting. I like it. It's not the best I've seen, but it does make me feel like I'm back in the cinema in the 1980s watching a general release print, and I think that's all we can ask of any movie that is released on Blu-ray or 4K disc. So in that regard, I think a very good job has been done with this, even if I would have preferred the option to play the original Dolby Stereo tracks. While I don't have the Blu-ray in this pack to compare the 4K against, I thought it might be a bit of fun to compare it to the VHS, and you might be surprised that there could be a couple of advantages to having that VHS. The first thing about the VHS is that it's sort of open matte. I don't think it's entirely open. We're not seeing the whole 35mm frame because I think there's some cropping at the sides. There might be a bit top and bottom, but you've certainly got more image information top and bottom than you have with the 4K. The second thing, of course, it has the Dolby Stereo sound, and I do prefer this. I think most people would prefer the 5.1, but I got to know this film too well, having been given the VHS in 1990, and I watched it many times early on. However, which has got the best image quality? And there's no doubt, as you would expect, it's the 4K, and that is the fundamental with these new releases on 4K. That's what I buy them for. It's more important to me than the sound, and that was what I really focused on in cinema. But there were exceptions, the Empire Leicester Square for one, with a fabulous THX system in there, that massive auditorium with all the echo, that just enhanced the sound so much to my ears. But anyway, I don't think I can fully recommend this 4K disc of The Running Man unless you're like me and you have a particular fondness for the film, in which case you probably already have it, in spite of it being a little dated and a complete load of nonsense. But whatever, I do think it's the best quality video we've seen of The Running Man on home video so far, so in that regard maybe it's something worth considering if you don't have it already. And if you're an Arnie fan, then you've probably got it already, or are at least thinking of getting it to go with your ever-growing Arnie collection. Well, welcome to the club. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to carry on creating content like this. Until the next video, I'll be back.